Hey everybody, welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my incredibly testy, fabulous co-hosts.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You're the worst, Rob. We don't like you
Who are
today.
these terrible people who are talking loudly into the microphones as I ask them to do?
It's Diana.
And it's Jackie. We've been sound checking for the last 20 minutes.
Check.
Just so you know.
Testing.
When everyone's feedback is
Rubber baby buggy bumpers.
I've been
I can't hear it. I can't hear the podcast. I gotta try to up the volume.
I've been singing Beyonce to the left for the last 20 minutes.
All right, so apologies everyone if this sounds really loud or still sounds really quiet. Who knows? I'm not great at sound design.
We're working on it.
We're trying. It sounds better than the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
We're in a hallway.
We have one microphone. Now we have 3.
But ABA Inside Track isn't all about sound design and podcasting tips. Please don't turn to us for any of those. We're actually a podcast about behavior analytic research. And each week we talk about, every other week we talk about a specific topic and related articles in the field. And Except this week, every 12 episodes, we get to go crazy and choose whatever garbage research we want to talk about.
No. It's not garbage research. It's just random.
Random. I don't mean garbage like bad research so much as just we can do whatever we want, no matter how relevant, irrelevant it seems to our fields.
We have a bag, and we open it up and pull articles out, remember?
That's right. That's right.
The bag contains every behavior analytic article ever written.
We've taken the past 3 years, every behavior analytic paper, printed them all out, and we threw them in a bag. Then we will start a fire after this podcast is over.
Bonfire with s'mores.
And
it's possible we didn't listen to our own sustainability episode.
Right.
We might not have, no.
That's okay.
And this is Research Grab Bag number 3, part 3, The Double Revenge.
The Reckoning. So this week, we're going to be talking about 3 pretty unrelated articles. The first article is Jackie's article. Oh, wait, no, I can't tell you what they are because we have to pull them out of the bag. So
that's okay.
I'll pull them out of the bag. Okay, here we go. I'm going to pull out the first. Jackie, you pull out your article, all right?
This is completely random.
Here we go. Pull it out of the bag. Oh, my goodness, look what we got. Your article is called The Effects of a Contingent Caregiver Imitation of Infant Vocalizations. A comparison of multiple caregivers by, it's very tiny on my phone, not my phone screen, on the printout. Hirsh, Stockwell, and Walker from the Analysis of Verbal Behavior 2014. Now it's my turn. I'm going to pull out an article. Here we go. Ready? Oh, wait. I got one. Oh,
stuck.
There it is. I got it. Evaluating the ability of the PBS children's show Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood to teach skills to 2 young children with autism spectrum disorder by pretty much everyone who's ever published. There's a lot of authors on this 5-page paper. It's Dotson, Rasmussen, Shafer, Colwell, Densley, Brewer, Alonzo, and Martinez from Behavior Analysis and Practice 2017. I'm so modern with my random choices. Diana, you got to take yours out. Here we go. You got it?
I got it.
All right. Oh, and look.
Here it is.
Here it is. The effects of physical activity on the on-task behavior of young children with autism spectrum disorders by Miramontes and Schwartz from the International Electronic Journal of Elementary Education, 2016. That's a new one.
Is this our first episode that hasn't featured a Java article?
At all? I think we had...
we already did that. Is this our first TAVB article?
Yes, I think it is.
Yes, it is.
One.
I specifically went and looked at the Analysis of Verbal Behavior journal because I haven't looked there in a little bit, and so I wanted to go back through and see what was interesting for me.
Okay.
I think it's most likely our first IEJEE.
Is definitely our first one of those. All right. So, since we all have different articles, why don't we each take a turn talking about the article we just randomly chose and we haven't read yet, so I guess it's going to be pretty embarrassing.
No, I actually read mine before.
It's
Let's
a joke.
do it.
It's a joke because you just got it out of the grab bag.
You like that?
Anyway, our theater of the mind is exploded.
Did not get the joke. That's awesome. I actually chose this article because, as you know, that's slightly different from episode 1. I now have a child.
You
do? Jackie's catchphrase keeps changing.
I know. Now it's, I have a child. And she is nearing 6 months old. And I wanted to look in the analysis of verbal behavior to see if there was any articles related to her age bracket. And I wanted to veer away from choosing an article that focused on research with kids with developmental disabilities, just because we always talk about those.
True.
So I was like, I always talk about dogs too. So for the last 2 grab bags, I've used dog articles. So I was like, okay, maybe I should expand. And so I chose this article, and I wanted to see what I could glean from it to, do on my own kid, I guess. And
because what's research if you can't do it on your own?
Right?
Kids?
Like, why have a kid then?
Why be a behavior analyst?
Right.
If you can't do research on your own children.
Absolutely. So
no, that's unethical.
Yeah, it is. It's published research, but I can have fun. So and I will. So what they did here in this study is they wanted to look at infants around the ages of 7 to 12 months that couldn't speak words yet, but were making sounds, and they wanted to look at whether contingent imitation of the mother's vocalizations or contingent imitation of another caregiver's would increase infant vocalizations. So this was a replication and extension of a previous study that was published in the Journal of Behavior Analysis by Pelliez and colleagues. And how they extended the research was they used older infants and they used multiple caregivers. Yeah, they used a similar procedure as the Pelliez. I hope I'm saying that right.
I thought it was Pellieu for some reason.
It's P-E-L-A-E-Z.
Oh, okay.
So,
I just couldn't read. I was reading on I read this one on my phone. Don't do that.
Pelliez. So I'm sorry. If someone wants to write it and tell me how you say that last name, that would be awesome. But yeah, and we know that there's been a lot of research out there looking at infant verbalizations, how that's correlated with later academic success, how that's correlated with... Yeah.
For babbling?
Yeah. There's been research suggesting that the earlier... it's correlational, though, not causation, right?
Right.
But the earlier that infants are babbling, saying words, emitting sounds, making more complex sounds with their mouth and their, vocalizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they have a better predictor of academic success and a more complex vocal repertoire earlier.
Oh, wow.
But again, that's correlation, not causation. But that's what
What if you're the strong silent type?
I don't know. They probably got mixed up in the average, right?
Fair enough.
Because these were not obviously single subject design studies. They were group design. So
do you know in college I would wake up and I would see how long I could get into my day without saying a single word to anyone?
Wow. So
sometimes all the way to lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
So my whole life, I think I've tried to say something immediately upon waking up. So my dad was always up by like 4:30 in the morning, and if I wasn't up by like 5 a.m., he would mow the lawn outside of my bedroom window, or vacuum if it was in the winter outside. Yeah, and then he'd be like, "Good morning, Jackie," and he's got this like bellowing voice. He's not listening. It's okay. And so I do the same thing now to everyone I see.
Yeah.
Which is annoying to my boss currently because she hates morning. And so she actually sat me down and was like, please do not talk to me before 10 a.m. If you say hello to me, I will not answer. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So now when she walks by and I see her, I just mouth, good morning. But I don't say anything. And I don't know if she appreciates it, but nice. I can't not.
You should get her a Garfield mug that says, I hate mornings.
I really should.
I think he hates Mondays, but
he hates Mondays.
He hates Mondays.
Yeah, but I could marker him out. I could marker it out.
Photoshop that.
Yeah. Most of the research that looks at this correlation between increased infant vocalizations and later academic success and later complex vocal repertoire only looks at mothers. So they wanted to see if there would be a similar result with different caregivers, since moms are not the only people that hang out with their kids, right?
In this day and age.
Right. So, so they wanted to look at conditional conditions across multiple days. They wanted to look at single session data, so within session data instead of aggregate data, to see if anything was different there. And one child had a speech delay.
Okay.
So they wanted to see what happened there. That's how they extended the research, or purported. I love that word. I try to use it.
Now, was the Pilia's study... I know I read a study on infant vocalizations forever ago, and it may have been that study just on the simple babies find their babbles reinforcing.
What it was that they find the mother's reaction reinforcing.
Okay. I mean, I don't remember if they got that deep into it. It's just I think all the participants were the infant mother dyads.
Yes, they were.
Back then. Okay.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that research. If it was the same one, because it's something I do with all my kids. They make sounds, I make them back to them, and universally across all three of them, you see a nice reaction, or I've seen such a nice reaction with all three of them. Like, they get really excited and they babble more.
And then they kick their little arms and legs.
Yeah.
So
That's
this,
so
at least
cute.
anecdotally, the effect I've seen is they love hearing their own vocalizations back to them. And as a father, it seemed to work just fine for me.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens in this study. But yeah, so what they did is they wanted to see if that contingent response was a reinforcer for long-term behavior change and not just in that moment. I love the little arm and leg movement, though.
Right? It's so cute. Yeah.
They basically replicated the procedures by this previous study. So they had 3 participant triads. It was a mother, an infant, and then another caregiver, whoever interacted the most, apart from the mother, with these infants. They were all male boys, of course.
Male boys.
I love it when they say that they're all boys.
Male men boys.
They averaged around 9.5 months, and then they had a mother, and one of the participants had a father. One of the participants lived with his mother and his grandmother, and the other participant had a father living with them too. So 2 fathers and a grandmother were the other caregivers that were in the study. I said that really horribly. It doesn't matter that the father might also be in that other house, but it doesn't tell me. I said like he had a mother and a grandmother.
I mean, at some point, this baby had a father.
Right.
It had to happen.
Right. And yeah. And I love that they said this. So for all participant triad sessions were scheduled to accommodate the child's typical daily eating and sleeping patterns.
Wake the baby up. I'm here for research.
Right. I think, like when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, you did. Because
Right.
you never screw up
And
a
like
schedule.
the baby's asleep again.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like
come back.
That sounds like what would happen to me. I just know how my timing always works. Like, oh, it's always snack time when I've come to observe, even though it's 9 a.m. What?
Right?
Yeah, it's always snack time.
It's
Yeah.
always snack time. For me too. Yeah, so they ran sessions in the participants' homes. They tried to find a quieter place where they could set up multiple video cameras, multiple audio recorders, so that they could see and record the infant vocalizations. They created these questionnaires distributed to the caregivers prior to the start of the sessions, asking about the relationship with the child, the nature of the relationship, the amount of interaction time that occurred each day, and then across the week. So that's kind of interesting.
My favorite was the dad who had an hour of interaction with his baby. It's like, wait,
A week?
Over
day.
a day.
Okay.
But that kind
on
of
average.
If he gets home late, the baby goes to bed.
I guess.
right. So
but
if you
Get
think
home
like
at 6, baby goes to bed at 7.
right. So that's
it was 4 on the weekend, so yeah.
4 is still not a lot though.
No. What is your secret, guy? Tell it to me. How do you get away with this?
That's awesome. So they used a BA-BA design or a BA-BA design.
I thought they were just being cute because it was baby
Ba, ba, ba.
baby language.
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
did
oh,
too.
so-
I was like,
so
oh,
adorable.
but they weren't. So the B design is our contingent imitation sessions. The A is the control session, and the dash just indicates a separation of the days, which I thought that was interesting. Across all of the triads, the mother did the first set of conditions, and then the other caregiver did the second set of conditions. And they were only 3 minutes in length, so not very long. Then they had a break, then they did some more. But 3 minutes is like not a big deal in baby world.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a baby, that probably feels like a long time.
Well, if you're a
Like,
parent.
I can't remember anything before this moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, so their primary DV was infant vocalizations, and they based their definition off of the previous article's definition, so they stole it. But they said that they stole it, so it was okay. So the B condition was the contingent imitation condition, and in there, the caregiver was instructed to maintain eye contact with the infant throughout the entire 3 minutes, smile, use a normal speaking voice, and deliver contingent imitation regardless of the magnitude of the infant responses. So if it was quiet, the mom or other caregiver would have to deliver whatever response the child was emitting. If it was loud, they'd have to be loud. And the infant was in a high chair, and they were an arm's length away from the caregiver or the mother. So the mother was like basically staring at them. But this is normal.
That's intense.
Yeah, but that's how you are like in life,
guess.
right? Like,
Yeah.
So when you're feeding your baby, I was noticing this today when I was feeding Sylvie some applesauce. Like, we were real close.
Mm-hmm.
And she did this like thing, and then I got applesauce all over my face, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm real close. So it seems close, but I guess you're that close in real life.
Yeah.
So
if the baby says goo, you say goo.
Yep.
If the baby says ba, you say ba.
Right.
Okay.
And the experimenters were not within eyesight of the baby. So they were several feet away to not distract the baby. Because you know how babies give that, like, stranger glare? They wanted to avoid that.
I do. I've gotten that many times from the baby.
Me too. The A condition was their control condition. And what they did is they audio recorded the infant vocalizations from the first contingent imitation condition, and then they provided the same amount of responses or vocalizations during this control condition.
Gotcha.
That was nifty. How they had
that
that
was
playing
nifty.
in the parent. Parent
Yeah.
had earphones, so the parent would hear the vocalization and know.
Yeah.
Make my vocalization.
So the number was
The same. Yep, the number was same because they were listening to what happened before, and then when they heard the baby goo from previous session in their ear, then they would goo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
They fudged it a little bit. I think they mentioned something like, oh, the first session the baby didn't vocalize for a good
Right.
minute, and then the baby started crying in the second session. So they're like, let's just change that one.
Right. But most of them, they said that there was around 16 to 18 vocalizations per session. So they did have some. And they said that this was a good control condition because extinction wouldn't want to be used in this situation. So
Right.
they wanted to provide some sort of vocalization so that if the infant was vocalizing during the control condition, that then vocalization wouldn't extinguish in the absence of reinforcement. And they did show that. I can't remember where, but it's like an old video where it's like a psychological experiment where they're looking at the mother smiling at the baby and like looking at the baby, and the baby's like, ooh, ah, and then the mom makes like a neutral face for like 5 minutes, and then the baby like tries to get the mom to smile, and the mom doesn't smile, and the baby like gets seriously distressed.
I feel like
Have
I
you
watched
seen
that
that?
once
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
And it's awesome. I tried to do that with
Poor
Sylvia the other day,
baby.
but
I know.
I couldn't because it was too cute.
Yeah.
I had to laugh because she was like, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so the graphs are unfortunately not that noteworthy. Really?
I couldn't really even tell where they had the second. They made a big deal about the second caregiver in the purpose section, and then it felt like a bit of a footnote. I mean, there's another graph later after the cumulative ones where they sort of, here's what it was, and
Right.
But I had a hard time with these results. I felt like they were very all over the place, and then did not jive with the parts of the discussion.
That is true. I agree with you there. But let me tell you what happened. So for the first participant, Max, during contingent imitation, you see across sessions an increase in cumulative number of infant vocalizations. In the control condition, you see it leveling out around 5. When you go back to contingent imitation, you see a slightly increasing trend above control, and you see that replicated across multiple panels for mom.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at Max's dad, I think he was the 1 hour a week, 4 hours over the weekend dad. We really didn't see an effect of contingent imitation, really. I mean,
You
basically
had much fewer overall vocalizations.
around 5 for both the contingent imitation and control, except for the final control condition where there was none. So
They
that
were having an off day.
they were having an off day. They were fighting.
Yeah.
So this is, I don't think necessary.
And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon.
That's awesome. So here you don't really see the effects replicated with Max's dad. When you're looking at Liam, who's our second participant. Again, you don't actually see an effect for contingent imitation across sessions. There really isn't a difference in the cumulative number of infant vocalizations between contingent imitation and the control, except for the last control condition where you see an increase in responding, possibly due to maturation.
Were these happening concurrently?
Oh, yes, concurrently.
Yeah. So the increase happens at the same point in time for both mom and dad.
Yeah.
And it's during the control, and it's at the end of this whole thing. So, yeah, maybe
he's
maturation.
That's what I'm thinking.
So that's what it looks like.
And then for our final participant, George just loves chatting. So he had an increasing number of infant vocalization in all conditions, more than anyone. It's just going up everywhere. So he just loves to chat.
I wonder if he was imitating the vocalizations from his mom. Like when she said goo from the earpiece, did he say goo?
Yeah. So the control condition actually resulted here in higher levels than the contingent imitation.
He's very advanced.
Yeah, he's super advanced. He's going to do well in school.
That's right.
And then they also looked at whether infant returned the vocalization exactly or partially. So if I said baba, did you say baba? If I said baba, did you say ba? So the first one was an exact. The second one was partial. And what you see for Max is that there's a lot of partial imitation, a few exact for mom and none for dad. For Liam, mom had mom B1, so the contingent imitation for mom had some partial vocalization imitation, and for mom, the yoke condition had some exact, but then grandma had nothing at all. So Max's dad and Liam's grandma really need to up their game. And then for George's mom and dad, you saw a lot of infant return, both exact and partial across mom, and some exact infant returns for dad, in both the contingent imitation. So in a sense, this is the graph that the authors suggest they are replicating the results of the previous study, showing that contingent attention or contingent imitation does increase infant returns. But if you're looking at the previous cumulative record graph, I don't necessarily think you see that shown.
For the most part, was no differentiation between the control and the experimental,
with the exception
condition.
of Max.
Yeah.
And you actually see an increase in vocalizations in the control condition, which means you probably don't have a great control condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah.
Was Liam the one who was speech delayed?
Yes.
Okay.
Liam had the speech delay.
Okay.
So you didn't see an effect of that on the speech delay. So there you go. They suggest in their discussion that contingent imitation does increase infant vocalization. Based on these results, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So, but I'm still going to do it.
It's probably not going to hurt.
Right.
No, there's nothing wrong with making, imitating the baby's sounds back to the baby. I mean, it's interaction, and any interaction is going to be a positive interaction. And some results say do exactly the same ones. These kind of do, kind of don't.
Right.
But why not? I'd rather imitate what my baby is babbling than try to make up my own crazy language anyway. So.
Right, and they did have some limitations. They had some issues with the yoked schedule. Sometimes, like we said, the baby wasn't talking, or they had to stop the audio because the baby was crying, or babies are inconsistent. So, so I just thought that was interesting and was applicable to my everyday life right now. So that's why I picked this article.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah.
Randomly out of this grab bag.
Randomly.
Wow.
Thanks, Jackie.
All right. Well, why don't we just go up? I think, Donna, you said why don't we go by age? And since my article has to do with toddlers, not preschoolers, why don't we talk about evaluating the ability of Daniel Tiger's neighborhood to teach skills to children with autism spectrum disorder?
Can I already say now that it makes me mad when people use the word ability? Like it gets...
You can totally say that.
I know you can, but it kills me.
No. You can totally say that makes you mad.
Oh, okay. I mean, they can write it too. Like it's.
You don't need to say that. There's no need to say that.
I really hate
What
it.
would you say instead of ability? Just nothing?
Don't say that. Just say what you're doing. Just say the behavior. You don't need to say that you are able to do the behavior. You just say the behavior. But ability applies that the behavior lives inside you and that you're able to produce it at certain points in time.
The ability lived inside me at all times.
That's right, yes.
I didn't need the magic
doesn't.
Daniel Tiger's feather.
It doesn't. It's
losing
it's
it.
behavior that's produced and maintained by historical contingencies.
What are you losing?
I'm looking for it.
Oh, okay.
So whenever you write to be able to, you just cross that whole phrase out. And then whatever the verb was you were going to say, you just say the verb.
Yeah, I never used to be able. I never let any of my students use it. I get really angry. And then I cross it out multiple times with lots of exclamation points like, able? Really? And now no one says it anytime, anywhere in my class.
You punished that.
I sure did.
Well, I guess since we've already taken a little bit of a tangent, why don't we take another one by sharing our first secret code word of the episode. So for those of you new to ABA Inside Track, we are an ACE-approved continuing education provider. And that means that by listening to our show and paying attention to the 2 secret code words, just to prove you were listening really intently, you could get CEs. And the first of these secret code words is Hooper. 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 Like Mr. Hooper from Sesame Street, who most of you don't know if you are over the age.
Mr. Hooper, oh my gosh, I love him.
Yeah, if you're under the age of probably 25, you have no idea who that is.
Probably 35.
He died a long time ago. It was a classic Sesame Street episode.
It was classic.
Big Bird learns about
quite
death.
a long time ago.
It was like 81 or 82.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
I just figured out what Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood was because I really wanted to watch the first episode of Sesame Street with Julia, the new character that has a diagnosis of autism.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up really early one day when I was on vacation.
We don't know that she has a diagnosis of autism. All we know is that the Muppets have assumed that she has a diagnosis of autism. I don't think it's explicitly stated.
No, it's not.
It is.
They say she has autism.
Yeah.
Alan, the guy who runs the corner
Yeah.
store, how does he know?
Everyone
knows
knows in
everything.
Yeah, everybody knows in Sesame Street. They did say in the show.
Alan runs that street.
He's
Real
like,
confidentiality, like, hey, Julia, the Muppet with autism.
but anyway.
It's not your business, Alan.
But I
Why
wanted.
don't you go mine the malts, all right?
But I wanted to watch it when it came out the first time. I wanted to get a good glimpse, so I actually got up early when it was on. I woke up before my entire family. I was at my dad's house, and so Sylvie was still sleeping.
Was he vacuuming?
No, he was actually he got an RV, so he was sleeping in the motorhome, which is good. So he's chilled out in his older age. But I was watching it, and then Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood was on afterwards, and I was like, oh, I've never seen this. Maybe I should just get a little glimpse of it to see what people are talking about. And it started, and I was like, did they rip off Mr. Trezor?
Mr. Rogers?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Rogers. I'm like, this is oddly familiar. Like, how did they get, the trolley and the king and
the
Casey
owl.
and the dog and owl? And then I was like, and I asked somebody, I was like, why does Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood just look exactly like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? They're like, Jackie, it's a spinoff. And I was like, oh.
Do you know, Jackie,
Yeah.
we had this exact same conversation on a podcast that we all did together. It must have been episode 5 or 6. We actually talked about Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and how it was a spin-off of Mr. Rogers, and you were amazed.
Well, I guess I forgot that. So
The world contains so much wonder.
I know, but it's pretty good. And I like that they call the grandpa Grand-Père.
Daniel Tiger
That's
French?
pretentious, man.
I know, I love it. No, he's not French,
Oh.
but his grandpa is. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Anywho, so...
Are you going to play this Daniel Tiger song?
It's a beautiful day. I could add
It's
that
Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
You want me to put that in?
Believe.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could add it in
Won't
right
you ride along
now.
with me?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?
It's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, a land of make-believe. Won't you ride along with me?
Ride along.
It's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, so much to do, so much to see. Won't you ride along with me?
Ride along.
I've got lots of friends for you to meet. In this land of make-believe, a friendly face on every street just waiting to greet you. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
Unless I get bored, and then I won't add it. Let's start with some background information. In case you don't know, children with autism spectrum disorder typically
Daniel
show...
is a tiger.
And he lives in a neighborhood.
Typically show deficits in social communication and patterns of restrictive and repetitive play behavior. Which, I mean, unless this is the first time you've ever read such an article, yeah, you already know that. Most of you probably also know that video modeling is one of the treatment packages that is used to try to ameliorate this. So by sitting and having a student sit and watch a video of either themselves or of an adult or a different peer engaging in some target play skill or social skill, there is research to show that they then increase their ability to engage in that same skill. So they sit and they watch a video, and there are a lot of pluses. There are a lot of reasons that might be. Certainly there's a model. The model's always the same, and most children love to watch TV. So those are some of the reasons that video modeling sort of was developed. Now, while we have all these videos, and if you've ever worked in a school in which video modeling is used, you've either used commercial videos or you've created your own videos, which is a real fun chunk of time to edit those together. The question here is, what if the kids just watched TV and learned skills by watching a regular TV show?
The American Academy of Pediatrics hates this right now, right? They'd be like, no screen time. No screen time.
I think they lightened up on that recently.
No, they limited screen time.
Yeah.
But they mean limited screen time because you're supposed to talk to your grandparents via Skype, not watch television.
My friend did that research.
Yeah, I love your friend.
Yeah. And talk to your grandparents on Skype?
No, she compared reading a book in person to reading a book on Skype to see if children could learn in both formats, and they could.
Oh, okay.
They also said that TV is okay if the kid's not just watching it, but you're interacting. So you have to sit and watch the show and talk about the show with the kid, and then it's okay.
And what is the point of having my child watch TV
Right?
if I'm supposed to then interact with them? Because
Right?
I can just interact with them.
Yeah. Anyway.
I usually talk while watching TV. But in any case, there is research to point out that a lot of children's programming does teach new skills to typically developing kids. I mean, see Sesame Street, that is the most researched show on television. I know Blue's Clues, when it was on the air, there was a lot of research around its effectiveness to teach skills.
Steve was my dream, man.
Steve is pretty great.
Oh, yeah. I think we may have already gone over this on the show.
I think we have too. We all have a crush on Steve.
All three of us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's great. So the question here is, well, would it work for kids with autism spectrum disorder, which apparently no one's done research to that regard, which I found surprising. There's no way that Sesame Street has never looked at, I mean, they've got to have looked into that, right? They researched the hell out of those shows. Like, what's the placement of the letter? How, they look at like kid watching patterns. They must have at some point said, let's include some kids with disabilities. So maybe it's just not published research because they just use that for their own program development. Right. So in any case, what if we used a great show like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood? And Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood was used for a couple reasons they explained here. I have a couple hypotheses as to why they might have chosen this over, say, Sesame Street or old episodes of Blue's Clues. Certainly, high rates of attending are typically seen for shows that have animation, a lot of movement, some sound effects. And of course, the goal here being if you have kids more interested in watching the show and attending better, there's a good chance that they will then learn whatever the purported skill being taught is. Jackie, you had a...
Daniel Tiger is an American Canadian.
Oh.
So that is why grandfather is grand-père.
Oh.
Is he from Quebec?
Yep.
Okay,
That's
that makes sense.
That's a very specific background story for Daniel.
Fred Rogers actually created this program.
Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood?
Yeah.
He would have been dead by the time the show came on TV.
He's a program creator. Maybe because
he made Mr. Rogers, and it's the whole neighborhood that the train takes you to.
Right.
Yeah, it's the land of make believe.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is, as we said, is a Mr. Rogers spinoff. If you haven't seen it, they chose this because it uses lots of positive components like an interactive learning components, elements of fantasy and make-believe, simple songs, and a socially meaningful character. I don't know how they determined that a little tiger was a socially meaningful character rather than any other character, but hey.
Doesn't that just mean he's popular right now with kids?
I guess
it
could.
And Daniel Tiger, the 4-year-old tiger, is the son of the actual tiger on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So it's not the same tiger as I thought. It's the son of the tiger.
Right. And the owl is the son of... the owl is the son of X, the owl.
And there's the prince. I think Prince Wednesday
Prince
is actually
Wednesday.
the Prince Wednesday.
Prince Wednesday is actually
show.
Prince Wednesday.
He's ageless.
And Miss Elena.
Somewhat tangentially, if you want to watch all of the Mr. Rogers, I know that they were streaming every episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on Twitch, the app that usually people use to play video games, but apparently they've been trying to stream other things like all of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, so you may be able to find those online if you really want to see them. In any case, if you have not watched Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, I think one of the best reasons that they would want to choose this is because of how explicit the show is in teaching skills. I haven't watched a ton of the episodes, but when I watch them, I remember Daniel gets mad, and they over and over in the episode, Daniel, you seem mad.
I watched that one too.
Grr, I'm mad. And then they you should stop and count to 10. And then Daniel goes, grr, 1, 2, 3. And they repeat it, and they sing a little song, and it's always to the same melody. It's like, when I get mad, I count to 10, or something like that.
It's so
They're
true.
Very simple songs.
Yeah, very
Do you
simple.
remember the classic, if you have to go potty, stop and go right away?
I don't remember that.
No.
It's a good one.
So it does really capture, I think, a lot of what you would put in a video model, which is explicitly modeling the behaviors that you would like the child to learn.
It's as if a behavior analyst wrote this series, right?
It's pretty good.
It's really good because they're like, if you're like the one that they talk about, the tasting the vegetables one, it's like, this is the steps that you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Step 1, step 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing.
I also learned how to make banana surprise from watching Daniel Tiger.
That's awesome.
It's just frozen bananas in a blender.
Oh.
Everyone
when
loves
you want to
it.
make banana surprise, get a blender. Put the top on the blender. Press puree.
Is that really the song?
No.
Oh, I was like,
I just wrote that.
wow.
It's copyright me.
That might be the same episode. Daniel tries a new food.
Who tries a new food?
It might be, but I can't remember the song.
I did not watch
For-
these
for
episodes
Daniel
in
tries new food.
preparation. Sorry. So, again, the purpose here was to say, well, if we had kids with ASD watch this, would they learn new skills? So they found 2 5-year-olds who qualified for services under the category autism in their local school. Both students were verbal. They would use short phrases. They engaged in a lot of parallel play and some cooperative play with bouts of stereotypy in between. And they had no history, at least according to parents, with video modeling procedures. The study itself used multiple baseline across behaviors, and they replicated it across the 2 participants. Basically, what the researchers did was picked 2 skills that were both based on episodes of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and that also are ones that are typically deficient in children with ASD, and that the parents stated, my kid can't really do that. And they chose tasting new foods or trying new foods and stopping play within a reasonable amount of time. So the researchers sort of broke each of those skills down into 4 parts. So for trying foods, touch the food, put the food into your mouth, chew it and swallow. And for stopping play, when getting the cue to stop play, saying okay, not whining, stopping within 15 seconds of the instruction, and then walking over to the experimenter. And so the data they looked at was the percentage of steps of each of these skills that the child engaged in order to determine if there was anything going on with this Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. They started with baseline, in which the kids just went in a room and played with toys for a while. And then one time during each of those play sessions, they'd put out a plate of food with 2 to 3 bites of one type of food. I think mushrooms was one of them. And I can't remember the other ones, but I know mushrooms stood out for me as a funny food to try. And they'd be like, let's eat this. And then they'd see, what did the kid do? Then they'd also set up a time where they'd tell the child, it's almost time to go. And then what did the child do? And that was their baseline. They later did a follow-up, which was pretty much just exactly this, again. Then when they saw that the kids really never did anything other than about 25%, so 1 out of the 4 steps for any of these 2 skills, they implemented the first video. So they took the kids and they'd go separately and they'd go into another room. They'd play for 5-10 minutes and they'd take them to another room and they'd watch an episode of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
The whole episode?
The whole episode, yeah.
Oh, that's long.
If the child seemed distracted, they'd say something like, hey, let's watch this episode, which did become a problem as one of the participants, Calvin, did need a special additional step to get him to pay attention to the to the ending play episode, which apparently was not as much fun as the trying new foods episode.
They were 26 minutes long.
Yeah, they just sitting, as far as I could tell, they just sat and watched the video. I didn't
that's what it says.
read anything differently. They watched the whole thing.
They provided no reinforcement or prompting.
Yep, and they just go back to the room and play for 5-10 minutes, and I think they'd implement their, hey, let's try a food. Or, hey, it's almost time to go.
I'm so mad that somebody else thought of this.
It's okay.
It's pretty straightforward.
I know. That's why I'm so mad that someone else thought of it. I should have thought of it.
And they'd run this intervention 1 to 2 times per week. They had at least 48 hours between each of the intervention trials. Once they showed a level of mastery of the skill for eating or for trying new foods, they then started the TV watching intervention for ending play, and then they did the follow-up. So pretty much went back to a baseline for the first skill, so eating foods. You want to hear the results?
Yep.
Okay.
I do.
In baseline, like I said, participants did about 1 of the 4 steps each time. Patrick and Calvin kind of had different trajectories. So Patrick pretty much was the perfect participant in that he started watching the movie, didn't immediately engage in the eating food skill, but then after a couple trials did with 100% of the steps. And then in follow-up, continued to try all the different foods. And then that was pretty much replicated across the second social play behavior. He started by not always ending play, then after watching the video, did start ending play, then during the follow-up, continued to stop ending play. So exactly what you want to see. Calvin was not quite as consistent, though overall his results showed a lot more variability, like he didn't always eat the foods and he didn't always start the play, especially actually during follow-up, his stopping play was down to about, it was, all over the place. It was 25, 50, I think 75 once, so not 100% in follow-up. But he did show an improvement in both skills from baseline, did start eating, he did try 9 different foods across the experiment. So you could say that that the show was actually successful in changing his ability, changing his behavior. So, in summary, I guess Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood does teach skills to children with autism. However, here's some limitations. Number 1, there's only 2 kids in the study,
right,
and they had a number of verbal skills already. What kind of functioning level would this still be replicable? If you picked kids who didn't talk as much, would this have been as effective? If you picked kids who talked more, would it still have been as effective? Who knows? You would have to do a replication and extension to kind of figure that out. The other piece that is good to mention is this any better than just doing classical video modeling? A 26-minute episode. For all of us who've done video modeling, you're watching a video, it's about 2 minutes long. That's very different than 26 minutes of a TV show. So while there might be positives to watching a TV show, it's already made. You can do it at home without actually training parents to do anything, to still have an effective treatment potentially.
It's less stigmatizing.
It might not necessarily be superior to classic video modeling in some respects. There's some research to show that adult mediation, actually you were mentioning this, Jackie, adult mediation when watching a show does improve sort of learning the lessons the show's purporting to teach. So would that have been the case here? In this case, it was just an experimenter saying, watch the show, and then sort of doing nothing for 26 minutes. Except for Calvin, who, when he would have stereotypy, they'd stop the show until he started watching it again, then they'd start it again. Are there other skills? They only looked at 2 skills here. Are we limited here? Would any skill work? Or only some subset of social skills or life skills?
Is Daniel Tiger magic?
Is there magic to Daniel Tiger that we can bottle? Also, they didn't really do probes for any length of time. I mean, the follow-ups were relatively brief in terms of when the intervention began. It was all done in playrooms and experimental rooms, so this wasn't something that they did in a home setting. Did these skills generalize at all?
Having a parent, caregiver follow-up would have been nice.
Yeah.
Also, are there components of the show that are more important? So watching all 26 minutes, well, you only need to watch the 10 minutes where Daniel Tiger's actually engaged in the skill, and you get just as much of benefit as watching the whole show.
Do you?
And it takes less time. I don't know. That's a question.
I don't know.
That is my question to you. Also, I'm curious why they chose to do the 48-hour break in between, because I know when Blue's Clues came out, one of the big strengths of that show was that it aired every single day, the same episode every day.
For a whole week.
And that was some of the research that changed the format of Sesame Street. Like if you watch Sesame Street in the 80s or 90s, you remember that Sesame Street was just all over the place. It was like, here's Bert and Ernie, now here's Elmo, now here's a song from the 70s, now here's the Supremes and that pinball thing. Whereas nowadays, if you watch Sesame Street, it's 15 to 20 minute chunk. And that was because original knowledge of how children learn was they only pay attention for 5 minutes, so you got to switch it up. Whereas Blue's Clues demonstrated that if you show the same thing over and over, kids can pay attention for a long period of time.
Like that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Exactly. So now Sesame Street does everything in those chunks. So would that have benefit here? Would that be something to look at? And why? I mean, was it just timing? They don't mention why they why they scheduled it. Is it we can't waste our researchers' time to make them watch episodes of Daniel Tiger every single day?
They were like, no, Daniel.
So interesting little study. I know I got a Google alert actually today on something about Daniel Tiger doing something. I didn't get a chance to read it. I'm curious if this got picked up by a news outlet and they're like, this research shows you that Daniel Tiger is amazing. So if you do see that before this episode goes live or after this episode has gone up, please note the research is really light so far. It's a brief report. So although it is interesting and deserves more study, please don't go around telling everyone they have to watch Daniel Tiger. It's the best social skills training programming a child could have, because we just don't know if that's the case. But still very cool.
It is very cool.
And that's my grab bag.
Cool. So I would...
Dinah, before we get started on your grab bag, I don't want to make everyone wait with bated breath, but we have been going a long time. Why don't we all take a little break? Everyone sound good? A little break? Take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Hey, ABA Inside Trackers. Are you interested in being a behavior analyst and you're not yet? If so, I really would recommend looking into the Regis College Masters in Science and Applied Behavior Analysis program. Our 2016 pass rates for first-time test takers of the BCBA exam was 90%. We think this is a true testament to our program. In addition, we're going to be starting an on-campus autism center in the summer of 2017. This is going to allow our graduate students on-hands learning right at our college, and you will receive partial tuition remission if you work at the center, which is pretty amazing. We also offer paid clinical placements and graduate assistantships starting in our students' first year, where all of our grad students are working in the field either part-time or full-time. I find you that job. That is part of my job. We also are approved by the BACB to provide intensive practicum, so students will complete 750 hours of an intensive practicum across their time at Regis. All of our faculty are PhD-level BCBAs with strong applied and research backgrounds in ABA, and all have published papers in respected peer-reviewed journals. We ensure small class sizes so that all students receive personalized attention from their professors and advisors, are easily accessible to meet with students. Two more really great things that I want to highlight about the Regis program is that we host an invited lecture series at Regis each year, which involves inviting outside experts in ABA to speak on specialized topics relating to practicing ABA. Last summer, we completed an international service trip to Iceland. This trip enabled students to learn more about providing culturally competent care to diverse populations. Students and alums worked with children diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder and provided parent and teacher trainings for 11 days. This service trip occurs every other year, and the next trip will be in the summer of 2018. And finally, we have a great location. We're just 12 miles from the center of Boston. We currently have rolling admission. We're accepting students until we reach capacity for the fall of 2017. Please check us out at www.regiscollege.edu.
So Diana, now it is your turn to share your grab bag article, and it looks like you're doing one on the effects of physical activity, which I know is a topic that you've been very interested in for a while now.
Okay, so the article that I chose for this grab bag was The Effects of Physical Activity on the On-Task Behavior of Young Children with ASD by Martinez and Schwartz.
I love that name.
I know, it's very fancy. And I chose this article because I discovered it recently, but I've actually been doing some relatively similar work myself.
Hilariously, I have been too, but with typically developing kids.
Yeah, but you and I did not know at all that one another.
No. We just found out tonight.
I know.
It was so creepy.
Crazy. And it ties in pretty closely with the work that Martinez and Schwartz were doing as well. So that's kind of cool, and I thought that we could talk about it. You know, it worked out great since I randomly drew it out of this bag. So there were 3 participants in the study. They were interested in, again, looking at what effects physical activity in the classroom might have on a short seated activity directly following the physical activity. So the 3 participants all had a diagnosis of autism. They were aged 5 and 6. Paul, Nate, and Liam were their names, and they were fully included in a kindergarten classroom throughout the day. The design of the study was an alternating treatments design, in which they had an initial baseline followed by intervention and then a recording of a journal activity to determine how on task the children were during the journal time specifically. So there were really 2 activities that they were looking at. There was a morning circle time, and the last 5 minutes of the morning circle, they randomly chose one of 3 activities to do for 5 minutes. The first activity that could be chosen was the teacher reading a book to the class. The second activity that could be chosen was doing 5 minutes of yoga, which contained 5 to 7 poses that they looked at cards and did. And then the third activity that they could do was a dance party or some type of maybe group dance, group gross motor.
I love
activity.
group dances.
I know. And kindergartners love group dances too. So the teacher randomly drew one of those out of a hat and did the 5-minute activity. They did have rules in place where they couldn't draw the same one more than 2 days in a row. And also noteworthy is that during the yoga and the dance party, if the learners with autism were not participating after 30 seconds, they used least to most prompting. There was no such thing in place for the book, though. Okay, so following that 5 minutes, then it was time to move over to working on journal activity, which initially I thought meant, like writing long journals.
I thought so too.
But it doesn't really, because these are all kindergartners. Right. So the journal activity could include some writing, but it also included cutting and drawing. So it could have been any type of activity that was like worksheet based, I believe. And there were clear instructions given to it. The participants needed to be following those instructions and doing the cutting or the coloring or the writing activity that was part of the journal. So that was really the independent variable. Like I said, initially they did a baseline session first before applying the intervention, which was the comparison of book, yoga, and dance party. And the dependent variables that they were measuring, there were 2 of them. The first was on-task behavior, which was defined as independent, continuous, appropriate engagement with the assigned activity. These data were only taken during the journal writing session, and they recorded data for 7 minutes. The on-task behavior was measured using a momentary time sample in 10-second intervals. And they also measured off-task behavior, which was defined as disengagement from the activity at hand and could include looking away from the activity, engaging in out-of-seat behavior, engaging in some other task, or talking to a neighbor in the classroom.
See, that seems weird to me that they would add on off-task behavior, because if you're off-task, I mean you're not on task, so just do one or the other.
Yeah, you don't really need both. And they measured, and as far as what they graphed, they measured the on-task behavior. But they went ahead and let us know what didn't qualify, so it's almost like an example and non-example for on-task behavior. They also noted that if the child needed support during that interval, then that automatically counted as off task.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Great.
One thing I wish they would have done here is actually quantified the activity, because they just said like moderate exercise. But I know that when we've been working on this type of experiment, we're actually looking at high intensity dancing, yoga, and actual just a circle time where everybody's just sitting before we do an on-task block building exercise. That's kind of what we're doing with some preschoolers right now. We have made codes for our behaviors. So our like high exercise, everyone has to be doing every 10 seconds, like a code 3, which is like jumping up and down multiple times. Code 3. Like moving around, because a lot of the times kids, like me, I'm like, do this, and I'm like going crazy, like sweating in this like tiny little room. I'm like, it's real bad. Some of the kids are just standing there staring at me, so not actually engaging in the high intensity exercise.
Right. But these participants, if they weren't engaging, then someone was prompting them.
Right, but we don't know, are they just lifting their leg up, or are they right? Because
No, we don't. Yeah.
lifting your leg up in yoga could be the same as lifting your leg up in a dance party.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah. So that's what I think they should have done, which is why I did it, actually. So, boom.
Nice. Good for you.
We'll see.
Right. Okay. They used a motivator for their momentary time sample. I just want to throw that out there because the motivator is a super helpful tool in case anyone doesn't know about it. You can set it to, it buzzes. You can set it to buzz for fixed interval, variable interval, and any interval that you need. And it can be really helpful. Reminder. You can do seconds. It can do minutes. Yeah. Thanks, motivator.
They're not paying us anything, Diana. You don't have to.
I love the motivator, and let me tell you why. So that was all they did. And this was a relatively brief study. They had about 4 baseline points that they took before they started intervention. And then each of the intervention conditions had 3 to 5.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
It really wasn't very long. So this was brief. There was no return to baseline following intervention.
I don't think you have to.
No, you don't have to. Right, but it could have been informative.
Yeah, but the alternating treatment design really makes you not have to do that. Unless what they could have done is an alternating treatment design and then did best treatment.
Yep.
And ran that out. I think that would be a really good design.
They could have done that. Or they could have maintained a control condition during the alternating treatments as well.
That's true.
So they did some IOA. They did IOA on 15% of the sessions. However, the IOA that they got was high. It was 96%.
That's great.
They also did a brief social validity assessment for the adults in the study and the students. And they also included a preference. They called it a preference assessment. However, I am going to call it a preference survey because it was just at the very end of the study asking all of the students in the class, which of the activities, book, yoga, or dance party did you prefer? And they wrote down their answers, and then they looked at the answers that corresponded to the participants in the study. It was a little less than an actual preference assessment. It was more of just a question asking and answering session. For results, what we have are, I think, some interesting results. I will go by participant. So Paul is our first participant. In baseline, he was on task an average of 53% of time during the baseline sessions. And then when they moved into the alternating treatments with the randomly drawn conditions, following 5 minutes of yoga, he was on task 92% of the time on average. Following dance party, he was on task 83% of the time. And following book, he was on task 45% of the time. So yoga was the highest for Paul. For Liam, during initial baseline, he was on task an average of 44% of the time. Following yoga, he was on task 55% of the time. Following dance party, 66%. And following book, 45%. And finally, we have Nate. Nate's baseline level of on-task behavior was 48%. During yoga, he was on task 73% of the time on average. During dance party, he was on task 79% of the time on average. And during book, he was also on task 45% of the time. However, please note, Nate was absent during 2 of the books.
Right. So he only had 1.
So it was only 1 data point, so it wasn't on average. It was just 45%. So what we see from those results is that baseline levels of on-task behavior were relatively low across all participants. Following the book condition, on-task behavior did not increase from baseline at all. For all participants, yoga and dance party increased on-task behavior at least slightly from baseline. And for one participant, yoga produced the highest on-task behavior following its implementation, and dance party produced the highest on-task behavior following its implementation for 2 participants. The last thing I want to note is when they did the social validity preference survey, our 3 participants all chose the activity. They said they liked the activity the most, which they actually had the highest percentage of on-task behavior in. I know. So Paul chose yoga, and Liam and Nate chose dance.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool. There are certainly some limitations here. We had a small sample size. It was a very short study. We don't have any long-term follow-up data. We don't have data for the remaining participants in the class. And they didn't go into too much detail about why this might be a phenomenon, right? Which I think would be good to hear more about. So presumably engaging in this type of physical activity should decrease the motivation to move following physical exertion, which should therefore increase reinforcing properties of attending to your journal activity. But they didn't really get into any of the theoretical background behind this work, so I would think that there might be room to further expand and talk a little bit more about these results in that way.
So Diana, I know this is a line of research you've been doing did a little work on yourself. How have your results compared?
Yeah, so what I've been looking at is working with, again, individuals with autism who are working individually, so not working in a group setting, but comparing preceding the work session with either 5 minutes of preferred gross motor activity compared with 5 minutes of preferred tabletop activity to determine if that has any effect on task behavior during a work activity at the table. And results are not really in yet, I would say. Typically, we're seeing a couple profiles. One profile is that there is no differentiation between the two conditions, and the other profile tends to be that there might be a slight advantage over including the gross motor activity before the work session. But the jury's still out a little bit, I would say. Some of the students who have been running the sessions, I've heard a couple different times that they would like to try extending the gross motor play or the play to more than 5 minutes ahead of time because they feel that might have more of an effect, but that's totally anecdotal. So that's what I got going on. I think this is an interesting area.
I do too. So what we're looking at is similarly to you. We're doing 10 minutes of high intensity exercise, yoga, or circle time, and then looking at on-task duration of block building with typically developing kids.
Cool.
So they don't have to build, they just have to be engaged with the blocks. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
And not trying to, like, poke each other and do a cartwheel.
And we just said if they were off task for 30 seconds, then it was over.
Okay.
Right? So that's
like,
how
that's enough of this.
Yeah. So that's what we've been doing, and we've actually we haven't seen a lot of differentiation either, but we're not done yet. We only have limited data.
Yeah.
Excellent. So something to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, but books don't seem to increase on-task behavior. But at this point, bear in mind, like in this study, these children were now sitting through a whole circle, which they don't tell us how long the entire circle was. Yeah. We know it was probably at least 10 minutes long because the last 5 minutes was the book. So they were already sitting during that time and then going directly to doing the journaling activity. So they may at that point have been sitting for 20 or 25 minutes.
Which is a long time.
Yeah.
Which is a long time. So it's not unsurprising that you would see those results following the book. And yoga and dance party both sound super fun. I wish they did that when I was in kindergarten. I don't think they did.
Probably not. That's the new hippy-dippy baloney. You only get nowadays. All right.
All I remember from kindergarten is that one day we all brought little baby food jars and they put cream in them, and then we shook them for what felt like forever until it turned to butter. And then my teacher had brought bread cut into the shape of turkeys, and we could all spread the butter on the bread and eat it.
Well, that's a good activity.
It was for Thanksgiving.
You can't do that now, though. Too much obesity.
You probably can't do that now, but that is what I remember from kindergarten, the one and only thing.
All right.
Yeah.
So before we enter dissemination station and bring our episode to a sad close, I just want to make sure if you are listening for continuing education credits, you get our second secret code word, and that is clue. A clue. C-L-U-E. Like a blues or the board game Clue. We are looking for Blues Clues because it's a really great game. Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Steve here. Rob kind of sounds like Steve in the beginning of
I should have, if I had it to do again, I would have been children's program entertainer.
Me too, actually. You and I could make a bomb show.
It would have been so good.
bomb show.
I'll just write for the show.
Yeah.
Said we're stuck doing this garbage again.
Dennis too smart to be a children's programmer.
You'd be the person, educational consultant,
Right? Yeah.
PhD.
Exactly.
That's awesome. There is a a girl named Jackie McDonald, my name, if you didn't know, Australian kids TV
No
star.
way.
Oh.
Yeah, so she does Saturday morning in Australia, and she's like, "I'm Jackie."
No
We
way.
literally should be best friends.
Have you tried to reach out to her?
No, because I didn't want to be weird. But maybe I will. Maybe on my birthday this year.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
She'd be like, people have been reaching out to me thinking that I'm you.
Right? And I'll be like, haha, just me. She's really older than me, but it's okay. Cool.
Excellent. All right, well, let's pull into a real quick dissemination station. Because most of these articles, since they're not around any central topic, we kind of already did the dissemination chunk when we talked about them. But in case there were some other points folks wanted to bring up.
Well, related to your article, Rob, I was going to mention that there is a cool study by Palechka and McDonald that looked at comparing homemade video models to commercially made video models.
Mm-hmm.
And they used, I don't know if this still occurs, but when you bought a Little People playset, maybe a few years back, it would come with a DVD with short videos of the Little People.
The claymation ones?
Yeah, I think they were.
Little people have helping hands. That one?
Maybe. That sounds good.
I feel like everyone who's ever worked with children
I've watched that
with
and I love it.
autism
It's true.
must have like their own bank. Like every generation, it's a new bank of like stupid theme songs that just run through their head all the time.
Yep, I've got the Thomas the Tank going through. I could be like, "No, Percy, not the chocolate."
Sir Topham Hatt.
Thomas Ringo Starr, what are you doing here?
Oh, Lord.
Sorry, you were saying something important.
It probably wasn't important, but it what they did was compare the use of, they edited down the entire Little People video into the same length of time and actions that they did for their homemade video, and then compared rate of acquisition of the video model sequence with those two.
Mm-hmm.
So that relates somewhat to using the Daniel Tiger video.
What did they find?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I can't remember. I think they both worked, might be the conclusion. Everyone should go out and read it
Yeah.
to get more details.
No spoilers.
Right.
I don't know. Anything with video modeling, if I could just say, here, watch this, and it did exactly the same as here. Hold on. Wait, don't do anything for 2 hours while I film myself doing something and then edit it and then upload it to YouTube or whatever. I'd rather just be able to turn on the TV and get the same results.
But
That'd be great.
they didn't compare the entire Little People DVD
Mm-hmm.
to a shorter video model, because that might be interesting to look at. I feel like with Daniel Tiger, it would be interesting to edit out most of the 26 minutes and just pull what you think are the most pertinent pieces to see if there was an effect there.
Well, there are a lot of questions with that study as to the efficiency of...
Right.
All they wanted to see is, hey, does this do anything? And yeah, it gets kinda. Now you'd have to fine-tune it.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone will do that research. I feel like there's so many studies that
I
have these like
wonder.
long, I wish we should do this, and then no, you never hear about it again.
Well, that's
It's
why we
right
talk
for the
about it.
picking, people.
Master's thesis.
I would also like to report that anecdotally, I once worked with a child who we taught him a play sequence. I think it was a video modeling play sequence related to like using a play kitchen, and I think he was learning to cook eggs. And then he started actually eating the eggs in real life, which he didn't eat previously.
Huh.
So that also mirrors a little bit of what happened there with Daniel Tiger.
Eat your eggs, kid.
That's really good. You should trademark that. And finally,
I just did because I made it.
I would like to mention that I think that we should replicate the Daniel Tiger study with Yo Gabba Gabba.
I'm gonna eat. Yeah. Yummy, yummy. There's a party
Yeah.
in my tummy. Carrots.
Chicken.
Yeah, chicken.
Carrots.
We want to go to the party. The party in your tummy.
I have not watched Yo Gabba Gabba yet,
That
so
show's just not on the air anymore. I don't know.
But
I don't know
it
where
addressed social skills, play skills.
Don't
a lot of
bite.
Don't bite your friends. a lot of really appropriate social interaction concerns that people might have for their young children, and they address them through song and through skit. And yes, it is very psychedelic and weird, but I think kids enjoy it. I enjoyed it, and I would like to see this replicated with a different children's TV show.
I thought about Yo Gabba Gabba.
How about Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Lose? That is a classic.
It's a good song. I don't know if they model as much as Daniel Tiger. Like Daniel Tiger, that show is very explicit in what they are trying to teach. It is there's no qualms. I wonder what Daniel Tiger is trying to show me right here. It's like, nope, he told you. Yeah. And then he acted out exactly what to do, and he narrated his behavior. He did behavioral skills training.
Right, yeah. No, it's not as clear.
Yeah. No, but it's.
But the songs are so catchy.
They are super catchy. But then, I mean,
Try it. You'll like it. See, that one is right there for trying new foods.
Yeah, but how much
I tried it, and now I like it.
So when I look at the Yo Gabba Gabba website, the last time they posted anything was in 2016. So I think you guys are out of luck.
I mean, you can find old episodes.
You can get the old videos.
I know, but
the whole point is to have the show that you can get easily. Like if you can't find the episodes, it's sort of.
Yeah, this is DJ Lance Rock. Visited Comic-Con.
Hey, kids.
Okay.
Yo. It's time to go. But first, let's remember what we did today. We read an article about baby vocalizations and whether Daniel Tiger will teach us social skills. And then we talked about exercise actions and on-task behavior. Let's go! I'm just going to end the show that way every time. No? You don't think so?
No, I loved it. It's
good.
Good?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's end it the real way, I suppose. So this has been ABA Inside Track. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you like the show, and we really hope you did, please feel free to check us out online at abainsidetrack.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com with feedback, suggestions for topics. And if your email's really cool, then we might read it on our preview episode, which comes out in between our full-length episodes.
You know what would be really helpful?
What?
Is if you could leave us a review on iTunes.
Yes.
Which is now called Apple Podcast.
It was always called Apple Podcast.
Well, now they want us to call it Apple Podcast.
Yeah.
Because that would really help us, and it would help your fellow colleagues, because the more reviews you have, the easier it is to search for new shows.
Come
and
on.
have your show show up.
Practitioners of ABA, let's make sure everyone knows that we're way more important than the American Bar Association podcast that always seems to be ahead of us.
That's right.
But yes, it would be nice if we got some reviews. Thanks. All right, that's all we're doing today. That was a pretty long episode for a grab bag. All right, we'll be back next week with our preview episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
See you. Bye, kids.